Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Elsa Abraham, and I am a speech-language pathologist working at PlayStreet. PlayStreet is an organization that provides educational services to help children with special needs become independent and live up to their potential. We offer parent empowerment programs, an integrated schooling program, and a variety of clinical services. As April is Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, we wanted to bring to you the pioneers in the field of autism to guide us all and spread more awareness and knowledge. Today is our fourth talk in this series, and in conversation with us, we have the lovely Miss Jessie Ginsberg. She is a speech-language pathologist by profession, who is also the CEO and founder of Pediatric Therapy Playhouse. She's also the director of the California Speech and Language Hearing Association, District 6, and is also the creator of Inside Out, which is a sensory integration program created just for speech-language pathologists by one of their very own. Jessie, we want to thank you so much for taking time to join us at PlayStreet's Autism Hour today. It's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and it's awesome that it can work out even with this huge time difference that we have.
Exactly, yes. We hope that it's okay and you're doing well despite the pandemic and everything. You're keeping well.
Yeah. It's been interesting, but it's been interesting everywhere. So.
All right. So, do you have a few words before we go into our questions? Do you want to say something to the people who's going to view this, and you want to share something before we begin?
I think it's a really exciting resource that you are getting to bring to everyone. I think that it can be really overwhelming when we think about how much we need to learn, whether we're a professional working with autistic children or we're a parent of an autistic child. There's so much to learn. So I just want to thank everyone and really, for being here and taking that step and being able to learn more to support, your child or your clients.
That's beautiful. So let's not, take a lot of time. I think we can jump into our topic and our questions for today. So what we've decided is this is something that's your place of expertise. So that's sensory integration in speech therapy. And me being a speech therapist, I'm just still getting the hang of it and still learning, okay, there is a part of involving this. So I would love to learn from your experience and understand why it's so important. We always relate it only to the occupational therapist and we leave it at that. We don't bring it into our sessions. So yeah, let's see what we as professionals and as parents, how can we benefit our children in that manner? Yeah. So moving on to the first question for today, I think let's start with, how did you as an SLP understand that there was a need for sensory integration in speech therapy sessions?
Yeah, great question. I feel like we all, if we are speech therapists working with autistic kids, we probably all have a moment we can reflect back on and realize how important it was, or that we were missing something almost. There was this little 3-year-old boy who I used to work with. This was my very first year out of college. And he would just run into the clinic and go in, out of every room. And I could not figure out how to get him engaged. He wasn't yet talking. He just seemed really dysregulated all the time. He was just constantly moving around. And one day I came up with this idea to have him jump on this. There's a little therapy table in our room, and I came up with the idea that he could get up on that table and then jump into my arms. And we did this, and it was the most engaged I'd ever seen him. He was so happy. He started using words. He was saying down, he was saying go, and it was all just from doing this very out of the box therapy idea. And I think that was definitely a moment that really planted the seed for me that there was some missing component in my sessions. And if I could just figure out what that was, it would help a lot. So that was really the very beginning of it. Ultimately, after going through grad school and opening up my own practice, I still felt like I needed to know more, which is why I then went ahead and completed my certificate in sensory integration, like you mentioned, which is really unusual for a speech therapist to do that. But in my eyes, there is just such a huge difference in why each professional might need to understand this. And for occupational therapists, we want, they might have goals for fine motor, gross motor, activities of daily living, and how we process all of the senses around us can influence how they can do those things. And it's the exact same thing with communication. When we have a child comes in, like that little boy I worked with who's so dysregulated, their body is not in a place to learn in that moment. They really need to be regulated. So how can we better do our job as speech therapists, by getting our kids regulated and in this place where they're ready to learn?
Yeah, all right. So I think that so how do you say, does it really, if a child does not have sensory regulation, how does it affect them in terms of speech?
If a child does not have regulation issues?
Yeah.
I mean, every person, I should say, has regulation issues, throughout the day. It's just that autistic children are more likely to have sensory differences, which then cause them to more likely be dysregulated in kind of everyday environments, but you think about, like, if you're at a conference and all of a sudden out the window there's a bulldozer and they're doing construction, you're going to have trouble concentrating on what the person's talking about, So for our kids with sensory differences, these little things in the environment might really be impacting their learning. So it's really important for us to be able to figure out what those things are so that we can really help them to focus better and be able to learn.
All right. So it becomes a lot more difficult, especially with children on the spectrum. It becomes a lot more difficult, right?
Definitely.
Okay. You mentioned, in one of the places while I was reading, you've talked about something called a child's optimal learning zone. Do you want to, tell viewers what you actually mean by that and how do we work on it?
Yeah, so I don't know where I came up with this analogy, but I like to use an analogy of a seesaw. And if you think of a seesaw, if those even exist on playgrounds anymore, I don't even know if they do. But if you think of a seesaw being balanced, I like to say that represents a child who's regulated. And when they're regulated, they're in their optimal learning zone, meaning they are attentive, they are ready to learn, they're engaged. This is where kids need to be in order to really process language and use language in the most efficient way possible. And then I like to say, if you think of a tipped seesaw, you could consider that a dysregulated child.
Okay.
So what happens is, so often in our therapy sessions or just in any everyday life, we see our kids starting to tip. We see signs of them starting to get dysregulated a little more. And so often we just continue to place the demands on them, continue to ask them questions, have them continue with the activity at hand, when in reality, all that's going to do is further dysregulate them. So I like the seesaw analogy because it makes you think about that when a child's dysregulated and their seesaw starting to tip, your number one job in that moment is to get the seesaw back to center. So it's calm the child, put less demands on the child, really try to bring that child seesaw back to center, because if it's not here, they're not going to be learning in the most efficient way possible.
All right. Oh, wow. That's a beautiful analogy, the way you brought it. I think all of us see that in our sessions, and I'm sure parents also see it at home. And, but like you said, we always go into the place of always placing demands on them and telling them, keep doing it. Only if you finish the activity, you get to go out and things like that, which again dysregulates them more, I guess, most of the time.
Absolutely. Especially, we're talking here about sensory dysregulation, which is, a lot more physical, but then you have the whole other can of worms, which is emotional dysregulation, And in a moment when a child is dysregulated, all they want or need from you is the calming presence of, an adult or a loved one or a supportive person who's going to lead them back to a calm state.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So, like we were saying, right? Usually the trend, I'm sure that you've also had, I've done my fair share of this when I say that the gentle trend is to use multiple flashcards. We're teaching them vocabulary, and we keep going on. We teach them, okay, this is an apple, this is a dog. We just keep doing this again and again, and sometimes that goes on for years together. That we hope that sometime the child will pick it up along the way and they'll start saying this. We know that the child starts to hate this approach and they start to avoid any kind of speech activity, both at home or also with the therapist. They come to that place. What would you suggest would be a better way to teach words or language to a child?
Yeah, great point, because I think we do resort to that because it's easy. It makes our job easy. We sit down, we grab our flashcards. We've all done it. If we're speech therapists, we've all had sessions where we do this. And it's like, oh, that was easy, but the truth is that it's not effective, so it might work in the short term, but it's not going to produce meaningful change in the long term. You could put a 2-year-old at a table and teach them to say any word, could be anything. By the end of 30 minutes, I bet you can get them to say that word, but are they going to take that word and then use it in flexible ways in the future and remember it and attach meaning to it, So it's just as simple as learning has to be fun and motivating. And if it's not, we're just going uphill, by doing activities and teaching language in context, and specifically in the context of play or something that's motivating for the child, that's when our sessions are going to go so much further. Yeah. So it definitely takes everything and you have to throw it out the window. I mean, I have 3 boys that are 1, 3, and 5.
Oh, okay.
So I have a lot of tantruming, crying, all these things in my household. So I know it can just be so easy sometimes to just say, okay, sit down, do your homework, write your words, and just force them to do it. But if it's done in a way that's meaningful and fun for, my son who's in kindergarten, that's where the true change is going to happen.
So you would always suggest that it's more natural, it's more, interactive and play. I think that's the base that we're getting at, right? Instead of just
There's this great quote that I like to share. And Katrina, I don't know how to pronounce the last name. I'll have to tell you later. But her quote is, learning can only happen when a child is interested. If they're not interested, it's like throwing marshmallows at their head and calling it eating.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yes, that's so true. So, Jessie, what do you say? Okay, we break out the flashcards. We don't do that. We go into a natural context. But when it comes to our children who are on the spectrum or, who have autism, they always tend to learn language by rote. It's not very flexible, right? With them, there are a lot of situations where it's very difficult to get them to be flexible and use like how we were saying, where language is more interactive and it's more dynamic. So do you really think that that's something that sensory integration can address? And if so, how do we do it with it?
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, just that conversation is why I'm here today. It's really what got me started speaking in this field, was that I was having the same conversation over and over with parents, where parents would come in and they would say, I don't get it. He has words, he just doesn't use them. Because it's really common for autistic kids to have words and then only use them some of the times. And I ended up writing an article for our national magazine for speech. And it was about this idea that I started using when I would talk to parents, which was, I would tell them, here I go with my analogies again, but I would tell them, picture a child's language development as a staircase. And the bottom of the stairs are regulation and engagement. The middle steps are basic language, which is kind of that rote language you're talking about. And the higher steps at the top are higher level language and cognitive skills, you know, things like abstract thinking and problem solving and all of that. And then I like to say to imagine there's a banister on the staircase, which represents a child's intrinsic motivation. You know, because we know that the best way we can climb that staircase, the fastest way, the safest way is by holding onto that banister. We know that kids are going to develop language when they're intrinsically motivated. But, you know, imagine a child coming into a session who's very, very dysregulated. You sit them down at a table, you do their flashcards, and all that does is almost like puts them right in the middle of the staircase. They have words, but they're missing these foundational steps at the bottom. Their staircase is not stable. They're never going to get to the top of the staircase because their staircase is not stable. So for kids, it's those bottom parts of the staircase, the regulation and the engagement, are completely foundational in being able to develop language. And what I have honestly found over the course of years of therapy is that if instead of going straight to the middle of the staircase and working on language, if I instead start at the bottom, start on helping a child get regulated, and then just working on them engaging and connecting with me, that makes my job like so much easier. It's like I don't even have to directly target language because they're learning language naturally through those engaging activities.
Yeah, like you said, so that's your base. Like you start in from, you know, sensory integration where you're giving them regulation, and then moving on always makes it easier for them.
Yeah.
Would you say, so yeah, like you were saying, you told, like, you know, the banister is your intrinsic motivation. So what do you say, like, you know, when we talk about sensory integration and bringing it into speech, do you really, you know, how do you explain it to parents or explain it to professionals, saying that, you know, sensory integration increases the child's intrinsic motivation, especially to use verbal speech?
Yeah, I think that it plays into it in a lot of different ways. You know, I think that sensory activities that kids enjoy are really fun for them inherently. So you don't have to work as hard because it's fun. You know, it's like I take you to Disneyland and put you on the rides. That's going to be fun for you. I don't have to convince you to do that. Like, and those rides are fun for you just because they are.
Yeah.
So I think it inherently makes your job easier because it's something that they enjoy or something that feels good to their body. But I think there's this whole other piece, which is more of the connection, emotional connection that you form with a child when you show them that you really are understanding and validating what they need. You know, so often kids need that movement, but we force them to stay at the table and completely invalidate their need to get that type of sensory input. But for us to be able to validate them for them, saying like, oh, I could see your body needs to move a little. Did you want to take a walk? Did you want to sit on the yoga ball instead of on the chair? Did you want to do something else? You know, that's such a different level of building an understanding with you and then the child.
Okay. So yeah, just adding in there, do you feel like, you know, what are those things that, you know, as a therapist or as a parent, what are those markers that parents can look out for, that we know that the child's not liking what you're doing, and we can move on to, you know, where we have to bring in regulation also, like from your point of view?
What are the markers that they want to move on?
Yeah, like, you know, how do you find out if, like, you know, if parents were listening to this, I'm sure they would want to know, like, you know, okay, what do I do with it?
Yeah, I think that you are looking for, like we talked about the seesaw, you're looking for that optimal state. Is the child alert? Are they engaged with you? You know, a child who is looking away might be disinterested. A child who's moving away is most likely disinterested. A child who's saying anything, which some of our kids aren't talking, so it's hard for us to know, but we have to really watch their bodies to try to figure that out.
Okay. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So this is a very good, I just want to know, how we're going to answer this out, and let's try to make sense of this in terms of, we're always taught, and I think this comes in right from years of, in therapy, and, when we're taught to take therapy, we're always taught about using external reinforcers with our children. Okay, you say the word, you get a sticker, or, you get your candy or whatever. We teach them, that you get reinforced. So what is your opinion on the whole aspect of using those external reinforcements to encourage speech?
I could talk about this all day.
Please do. We've got time.
Yeah, I've done a lot of research on this, not just for autistic children, but all people in general. I personally don't use any type of external rewards because my goal is intrinsic motivation. And research shows that when we use external rewards, it actually decreases our intrinsic motivation. Oh. So, for instance, if I said, hey, would you mind taking out the trash? I'll give you $5. You're gonna all of a sudden really not want to take out the trash. You're like, why are you giving me a reward for doing that? That must mean that that's not very fun. First of all, if you're willing to pay me to do that, that automatically sets up the tone that this isn't fun if I'm willing to give you something for doing it. But it also decreases a person's motivation to do it. So there are times when it's okay to use reinforcers. Like if something needs to get done quickly and it's just something that's really basic, involves no creativity, like if I said to my my kids, clean up your Legos and come get your ice cream, they'll do it, right? Because they want their ice cream, and that's easy. But it's not going to make them enjoy cleaning up like it's not going to make that fun for them in the future. Whereas if I said, oh, look at all these Legos, they're all bugs on the ground. Let's get them in that basket. Hurry before they run away. Come on, let's grab them. I'm going to get the red bug. Let's get the blue bug. Let's throw them. It could be something as boring as cleaning up, but we can still make it fun.
Yeah.
But the other thing that research says about external rewards is that when we reward someone for doing something, it actually narrows their creativity. So, we don't want to use rewards for things where it's really supposed to involve a lot of flexible, creative thinking, because that will actually decrease the child's ability to be able to do that.
Okay, yes. And, like you were saying, so we use it once, we might use it twice, but after that, I don't think the child's really going to get motivated. They get so used to the rewards also along the lines of that it becomes hard. So, I think this is one big question. I'm really excited and I want you to answer, and I want to hear how you put this in. But can you give us like at least 5? You can go more than that, but can you give us like some solid practical ideas that, therapists and parents, whoever's watching this, how do we increase their engagement? Like, try working this out. Can you give us those, those take-home things that parents can go ahead and do? And, we know that that will definitely increase engagement with our children.
Yeah, so I think, without knowing what a child's sensory preferences are or anything about their sensory system, something you could think about is a lot of kids, if they're not in that optimal zone, they might be really low arousal, meaning very low energy, or they might be the opposite, high arousal, which is very, high energy, lots of movement. So a lot of kids, if they're dysregulated, will fall into one of those two categories. So I would say the first thing to figure out is, where is the child? Are they low arousal or high? Because if a child is low arousal, what we want to do is give them lots of input, because our goal is to bring them from down here to up to optimal, but not too high, because then they would be high. Whereas if a child is high arousal, we want to calm them down to bring them. So like if this is our optimal zone, if our kid is high, our goal is to bring them down. If our kid is low, our goal is to bring them up. So I think it depends on what the child's state is, but you know, some things that I love to do at home involve no therapy equipment. It's just things that you can do in the home. Some of my favorite things, one, for instance, is creating a swing out of a blanket or a sheet. So you take two parents or a sibling and a parent and have the child lay down in the blanket and pick up the edges, and the child lays down and swinging them.
Okay.
So anything that involves singing, I love. Sometimes kids are sensitive and don't like that. So in that case, I wouldn't recommend it. But for kids who like music, that's something that has really been transformative for me and the kids I work with, is using a lot of music and singing. So a lot of the times we'll put them in a swing blanket and we'll swing them, and then maybe we'll count to 3, and then we'll crash them down onto the couch or onto cushions or something like that. You know, it doesn't even have to be a swing. If it's just one person, I do a lot of physical movement stuff, you can tell, but I do a lot of like swinging kids in my arms and then like maybe crashing them down into the couch. And even for kids who really like deep pressure and that's calming for them, being able to like sometimes take a pillow and push the pillow down on them. I don't know if this is a thing in India like it is in the US, but it's like flying an airplane where you lay down and put your feet in the air and you put the child on your feet to do that.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things to do. So for me, I try to do a lot of, you know, movement games that involve some kind of a routine. So when I do the airplane, which I was just doing this earlier, joking that I didn't have to go to the gym to work out today because this was a 7-year-old girl. I was getting my workout in. I would count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I would pull her hands down every time I counted to just give her some of that like deep pressure. And then we would go blast off and we would roll back and I would roll her and we would make funny noises like an airplane. And then I would say 1, 2, 3, crash. And I would have her crash onto the ground and give her tickles.
Okay.
And we would just do that over and over, you know, because kids enjoy routine and they know what to expect. And the more you do a routine, the more they will learn what's involved. So I do a lot of stuff like that, very physical, and a lot of singing.
Okay. So yeah, I definitely think it's a lot like, especially as a therapist, you know, we go in that, it's a lot of thinking out of the box and seeing what the child likes and moving in with that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very hard to predict what a child's gonna like. It's one of those things where you just have to be unafraid to embarrass yourself, because you're gonna do weird things, you're gonna make weird noises, all just trying to capture that child's attention.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I love that. I think we definitely want to talk more, especially because as a speech therapist, because I'm sure that we don't really, you know, we don't learn it out of books about sensory integration of what we're supposed to do. So what would you suggest? Like how do therapists even, you know about this and move from that in that manner?
Yeah, to learn more about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard because, you know, when you talk about sensory integration as an approach, it's actually a long-term type of therapy, basically meant to change how a person processes different sensory input over time. So when I went through the program, the problem is that it's not meant for speech therapists. It's meant for occupational therapists. Every person that I was in that program with had a master's or doctorate in occupational therapy. So, and I was writing handwriting goals, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, very outside our scope of practice. So for me, I had to do so much research on my own, so many courses, not just that one, so much reading just to try to learn more, which is what ultimately led me to create my program, which doesn't teach sensory integration as an approach. It teaches how SLPs can use sensory strategies for more immediate, to more immediately regulate their clients, as opposed to, sensory integration is more of like a long-term treatment approach. But I do a ton of free trainings, probably almost every month. I have a free training that I do online, and write a lot of articles. So I try to make it really accessible, because there's just really not, like, I wish I could say, go here and you can learn all about it, or go here. But the honest truth is that it's just, the information is not that readily accessible right now, which is why I'm working to change that.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think we all are. I'm definitely looking forward to, knowing more about this. So just a few more things that we would love to hear from you. What advice would you definitely give? I'm sure you would have seen parents who get so caught up in, okay, my kid needs to do this, and they get so lost in doing of the program. And, what would you suggest to parents of, should they become more aware and understand how their, child integrates the effects of the program into more functional life, and, try to get them to think more independently on their own?
Yeah, this is hard. I think that my advice is probably not necessarily what parents need to hear, but I think that, if parents could just wake up every morning thinking about, how can I connect with my child today? How can I form a deeper connection with him? How can I make time to be with him one-on-one without the distractions of everyday life? That is what is going to make the biggest difference in a child's life. What we don't want is, we don't want our kids to grow up feeling like they were never enough. We don't want them feeling like, I'm not good enough the way I am, I need to change, I need to fit in. What we want is for them to feel, perfectly loved for who they are, embraced for who they are, and be able to teach them how to advocate for themselves and what they need. So I think that, like, if parents just wake up every day with, at the forefront of their mind is, how can I get my child, the most connected to me and engaged with me, then that is going to take you the farthest.
Wow, that's beautiful, because I think what happens, and I think this is there in every culture with every parent, is we're always caught on this place of comparing our kids to, okay, my kid's not doing as great as them, or we go on that cycle where we always put that kind of pressure on. And I'm sure that even our emotional frustrations do come on the child, even without us knowing.
Yeah. I don't know if you know the quote, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah, definitely.
There will always be someone at that higher level than you, whatever it is in your life. It's really, really hard with kids, especially because you so badly want them to grow and develop and, be develop to their greatest potential. But, if you just focus on the child in front of you, that's what's going to make the biggest change.
Yeah. So definitely coming to this question, what advice, okay, now I want to take this in personally when you say that, what advice would you give a speech therapist who's really not considered using sensory integration as a tool? So how would you tell them to go about it to help families and children who have sensory processing difficulties? How do they find out, and how do they take that into their sessions and, go from there?
Yeah, I think that understanding sensory processing is essential to us being able to do our best work. I think not only does it help our kids get more out of our sessions, it helps us get more out of our kids. It's a win-win for everybody. So really trying to learn and understand that about your clients can not only, though, help you in your sessions, it truly helps a child in their life, because if you could help that child to understand what their sensory needs are, you can then help them learn to communicate what those needs are and advocate for what those needs are in the future. So I think there's such a strong connection that all starts with our work as speech therapists.
It's definitely beautiful. So you were talking about, your training programs that you definitely do once a month that you do as free. So is that open to all, or do you have because I'm sure people would love to know about it and join in and, get more information from you about that. So could you explain that a little more?
It's open to all therapists, and yes, we have a Facebook group called Sensory SLPs, which is where we do most of the trainings. But if you guys follow me on either Instagram or TikTok, I talk about those often. But right now, those trainings are specifically for other speech therapists to come to and learn.
All right. Okay. So it's mainly for the therapists and not just for parents, or it's mainly for teaching the therapists how to go about.
It is for therapists, and for parents, I try to put a lot of other free content up on social media through Instagram, through TikTok, to try to help spread the word for parents as well.
All right, beautiful. That's definitely wonderful. What do you want to give out and tell parents where they can definitely reach out to you? We're definitely going to get you connected to our parents as well. But if you would like to do that for yourself, we would love to get your info out there as well.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as jessieginsberg.slp, or TikTok which is at sensory.slp.
All right. Yes. So that brings us in. I know there's a lot more information that you have, and I'm sure that, as therapists and as parents, there's a lot more that we would love to learn from you. And I think this is just the starter. And I think as we keep interacting more with you, there's a lot more that we would love to learn from you. But I'm sure that our parents and, people who are watching this are definitely going to benefit from whatever you spoke so far. Definitely I am. So we just want to tell you, and even as we come to the end of this, we just want to say, on behalf of the team at PlayStreet here, we would really like to thank you. Jessie, thank you for taking your valuable time and sharing your amazing knowledge with us. It was definitely a beautiful and a fantastic conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
So to all our viewers out there, we really hope that you were able to actually understand the importance of working with a child with autism using their sensory preferences and really helping them enjoy their interaction. So like Jessie kept saying, interaction is the key. We start with what motivates them to developing anything. And without that, every skill you work on would just remain as a skill, and it wouldn't get integrated into their everyday. And that's what we at PlayStreet, we want to focus on throughout this month, is how do we use our relationships to build on movement and consciousness and enable our children to be the best version of themselves. So we really hope that all of you all who have been watching us have gotten a lot more awareness and knowledge and ideas from Jessie, and how you could put these strategies together to help our children take small, successful steps every day. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great day.